Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield. I'm Josh Williams, and I'm joined by David Hughes. How are you doing, mate?
I'm okay, thank you, Josh.
Good. We're back to normal this week. Last week, we obviously had a special with Analysing Everton included. For those who are regular listeners of the show, will know that we had an episode yesterday as well, a special 20 minutes episode on Van Dijk's injury. Today, we're back to normal, so talking about the derby, sadly. Talking about Ajax, who we face tomorrow night. We're recording on Tuesday, and talking about Sheffield United as well. So considering we've got 3 games, we'll get straight into it. The Merseyside derby, Dave. I have done what I can to try and forget it, so you'll probably have to,
Fill in the
bring a lot
gaps.
of the thoughts back for me. But what were your thoughts on the game? How the game played out? Was it as you expected? All that sort of stuff.
I don't know. I knew there was a risk that, from an Everton perspective, I knew there was a risk that Liverpool could be really at it. And I think within a couple of minutes, it was pretty obvious that they were. I thought Liverpool looked fantastic. That first goal was just constructed brilliantly. I actually feared at that point. I thought, this could end up being about 3, maybe 4-0. Obviously, the Van Dijk injury just, I think, changed things a little bit. Because obviously, because of what happened, a big player getting injured, the circumstances, a really rubbish challenge. I think that upset Liverpool's rhythm a little bit, and Everton grew into the game. But I'd say overall, I thought Liverpool were the better side. They looked really good on the ball. I thought Everton still offered something, looked dangerous. It was a competitive game, but I thought for me, Liverpool edged it. I thought they looked the better side. And yeah, for me, you could probably see the two differences between the two teams in that. Liverpool just looked really comfortable at that relentless pace. Whereas I thought 1 or 2 Everton players didn't. I think of like Andre Gomez a few times. He wanted to take an extra touch, or he got caught on the ball, where it felt like Liverpool were really, you can tell they've been playing at that top level for a while now. So yeah, in all, I thought it was a good game. Liverpool edged it performance-wise for me.
Yeah, I would agree. To be honest, I think I was really impressed with Liverpool. Really happy with the response. Obviously, we got beat 7-2. So going into this game, Merseyside derby, you need that response. That response was firmly there for me. I thought Liverpool won the performance on the day. I wasn't that surprised. I mean, there was points where Liverpool were just really, really fluid. And at Goodison Park in the past few years, we haven't been able to play like that. I'm not really sure why. I actually read a tweet as well. I think it said it was the first time at Goodison that Everton have faced Liverpool's front three or something like that.
Yeah,
On
that
the same
sounds
pitch
about right.
together.
Yeah.
That could be one of the reasons why Liverpool have struggled to be fluid. But as you said, the first goal summed it up really. One touch football through the lines, adding lots of value with your passes. And obviously the goal I thought was really good, and I thought Liverpool were going to push on. And Liverpool got done sort of thing by moments really, which hasn't really been the case. You can't really do Liverpool with moments, but Everton did. But the numbers on the day, if you was to show me these numbers before the match was played, I'd expect Liverpool to win based on these numbers. So the expected goals, 2.2 for Liverpool, 1.3 for Everton, and Liverpool double the number of shots. So Liverpool took 22 shots, Everton took 11. We did say before the match that Everton don't take that many shots, but when they do, they're quite clear cut. I think Everton probably lived up to that. If you look at Everton's shot map, they didn't take that many. But they did have, according to Understat, at least 4 relatively clear cut chances in and around the penalty spot, especially the 2 goals. It's just disappointing that Liverpool couldn't get the 3 points on this occasion.
Yeah, well, it's one of them, isn't it? Let's be frank about it. We don't need to be polite. On another day, they do get the 3 points for 2 reasons. One, obviously, Everton lose the goalkeeper through a red card. And I think 1-0 down with 10 men, losing your keeper with 80 minutes still to go. I think it's very difficult at that point. You saw how Chelsea struggled against 11v10 a few weeks ago, didn't we? Especially with someone like Thiago on the pitch. So that could have been one. And then obviously the offside at the end, which was really controversial. I still don't quite get what's gone on, but Mane's been deemed offside. But if that doesn't happen, then that's a 3-2 victory. So yeah, it's one of them where Liverpool have had to settle for a point. I think the performance, they probably warranted to edge it. As I said, Everton did have chances, beyond the goals. They had that Richarlison header that hits the post. They did create stuff, but I think if we looked at it as a collective performance, Liverpool were the better side, or maybe in a different set of circumstances would have won the game, and they didn't.
Yeah, I will be honest. Everton felt threatened in certain moments. They didn't always get the shot away, but there was a few occasions where they did get maybe a little bit behind Liverpool's high line. They got into the final third. I was really impressed with Calvert-Lewin. I thought Calvert-Lewin was superb from start to finish in terms of the way he linked with his teammates, the way he used the ball, the way he occupied Liverpool's defence. He obviously scored with one of the few decent chances he was presented with. So he did come across as a top striker, to be honest. So a lot to look forward there too for yourself. In terms of the refereeing decisions, obviously there was a few controversial calls, let's say, but we analyse football. We're not going to analyse referees. It's just not what this show's about, is it? So we're going to leave that for other podcasts. People can moan about that as much as they want. But you mentioned Thiago there. Thiago started on the left of Liverpool's midfield. What did you think of him? What did you think of him in that role?
I thought he was ridiculous on the day, to be honest. So a few weeks ago, I wrote a piece after the Chelsea game, and I was really apprehensive about writing it, actually, because I was concerned that people were going to think I was putting Thiago down, and I wasn't. So hopefully I got that across. But basically, I said in the piece, Thiago stole all the headlines after this Chelsea win. But the reality is, it wasn't that great of a performance. Like, I know I think he's completed the most passes of any player in 45 minutes in Premier League history, which was a really quirky stat. It's something nice to have under your belt. But if you actually look at the passes, it would do a lot of sideways, keeping the ball moving against the side, sitting really deep. Wasn't that much in terms of penetration. And in the piece, I said basically, Thiago did okay, but he's capable of so much more. And I thought at Goodison on Saturday, he produced pretty much a Thiago masterclass for me. I followed up, thankfully. I've been able to follow up on that piece now with, look, this game on Saturday, this was the Thiago that we're gonna see at Liverpool. I thought he was penetrative. He was so press resistant. He was great with the ball at his feet. He had that vision that we talked about on this show when he signed. If you think of that Henderson goal later on that gets ruled out, the ball to Mane there is just fantastic. There's a moment I remember where he latches onto a little through pass from Robertson, and he's pressured by Allen, who's obviously Everton's best ball winning midfielder, and he just kind of body shimmies and flicks it round and gets away from him, dribbles all the way into the final third. Honestly, Josh, I thought he was head and shoulders at times better than other players on the pitch.
I did as well. I thought at times, specifically in the start of the match, the first 15 minutes, he actually barely touched the ball, to be honest. And I was questioning whether he's suited to the left-sided role where Wijnaldum would usually play, but he grew into the game, I think would be the word, to the extent that around the hour mark he was basically controlling the game, really.
Just on your point before you carry on, Josh, I did notice this morning that he completed one less pass in this game against Everton than he did against Chelsea, despite playing a full 90 minutes. But it just shows, doesn't it, that really it's not always about quantity. It's about what the kind of quality of the ball and the impact it has on the game.
Yeah, well, I think one of the very, 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 very few positives that we're going to get out of Van Dijk being injured is I think Fabinho is going to drop into the defence, and that will allow Thiago to take up a central role at the pivot of Liverpool midfield, which I think is where he belongs. To be honest, I think he's such a controller, and his vision and his passing range all over the pitch is just brilliant. So I feel like you're nullifying him a little tiny bit if you put him on the left. Even though a few months ago when we spoke about him, I did see him as being our Wijnaldum, kind of keeping the ball ticking over, keeping possession. But what he'd do over Wijnaldum is the odd bit of penetration, like the Mane pass for the offside goal at the end. Wijnaldum doesn't really have that in his locker. Very few players do, to be honest. The way he disguised that pass caught a lot of players off guard on the pitch.
It is that disguise. It's unbelievable, really, isn't it? How he does it.
He's only really played about 150 minutes for Liverpool or something like that at the minute, and he's done a disguised pass like that that's caught opponents off guard. He's done that a few times already, about at least 5 times already, and it really does add so much value. Really speeds up your attack in an instant, and it really is valuable. So, in terms of him moving towards the centre and Fabinho dropping back into the defence, that's something, to be honest, I'm looking forward to seeing. I think Fabinho is a capable centre-back. And I think Thiago, the control that we'll lose with Van Dijk missing, I think Thiago will instigate with the ball, if you know what I mean. But in terms of Everton, we previewed James last week. He was a concern for me. And he was a concern in the game. There was a moment. You remember the switches of play that I mentioned?
Yeah.
There was a moment where he played a ridiculous switch. Lucas Dean gets on the end of it and the ball got put across. I think Richarlison hit the post maybe or something like that. But that was basically the moment I was fearing. I was fearing him doing exactly that. There was a moment where he got the ball on the edge of the box as well, the corner of the box, and he just got a sandwich out and pitched it towards the back post. He is a player I thought he was a real threat for Liverpool.
Yeah, he is. He's anyone even doubted how good he is, because I think there was doubters out there kind of seeing him as a somebody who did it in the World Cup a few years ago, has been living off reputation a little bit. But I think we've seen now in that game and in all of his games really so far that he's, for me, if we just put aside the tactical intricacies, because you can't just drop any player in a team, it's got to be the right fit with the whatever system they play. But for me, he could play at any level, like he could play at any club. For me, I think he is that good. So for Everton to have him is just phenomenal, really. I'd said before on this show last week, he contributed to 8 of Everton's 12 league goals. It's now 10 and 14 because obviously he puts the assist. He gets the assist for Michael Keane's header, and then the Calvert-Lewin goal. It's his really good through ball that Luca Dean runs onto, and then obviously crosses into the box for Calvert-Lewin to equalise. So yeah, that's the biggest thing for me. Beyond everything that he does that looks good, his composure on the ball, the way he seems to have eyes in the back of his head. He also just has this genuine contribution inside the final third as well, and it's that for me was a bit of like a proper test to see how he get on against the best of the best in Liverpool. And obviously he didn't run riot by any stretch because no player would, but he certainly impressed, I think, against a top side.
It felt like every time Liverpool were under any kind of threat, every time Liverpool were opened up a little bit, he was kind of central to it. I think even as you just said, then I think you might have just mentioned it, but even the second goal, the Digne cross, James feeds him, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought I'd give him a mention because there's individual attacking players, particularly players who are playing a little bit deeper, don't tend to have much of a game against Liverpool. I think Grealish did last week, to be fair, but I think James had one at Goodison Park, so I just thought I'd give him a shout. In terms of the goalkeepers, we obviously previewed the goalkeepers quite a lot last week. I was terrified going into the game. Firstly, what were your thoughts on Adrian?
I didn't think he done that great, to be honest. People seem to be quite saying, he done all right. I don't think he got, he didn't get bombarded with shots on target to really test him, and I think he makes a mistake for Keane's. And I can probably elaborate on that a little bit more because I've seen people defending him for it. It just so happens I was watching Sky Sports this morning while I was working on a piece, and they had Robert Greene on, who,
I've seen his analysis. Really,
did you see it? What it was fantastic.
Each week I see his analysis some other weeks, and he is top class the way he does it. I didn't see this week's though.
Isn't he? You know what, Josh? Just on that point, really quickly. Sorry, I don't mean to take us down a rabbit hole. People who listen and watching, but I just want to agree. I was watching it and thought his analysis is top work. Like, it's really good analysis. I definitely listen and watch him a little bit more. But he talks about Alisson. Not Alisson. You wish it was Alisson. He talks about Adrian, and he basically says that what happens is Andre Gomez is distracting Adrian as he's waiting for the cross to come in. And then he's still kind of distracted with Gomez as the ball's mid-flight and enters the box. So he's only about maybe 3 yards off his line as this is all happening. But then he realises the threat and starts to retreat to his line. But he's still moving by the time Keane latches onto the header. So then when Keane's actually headed it and it's on his way towards him, his feet still aren't planted in the ground. They're still in the air. So that's kind of why I think you see this almost this gap between him and the floor, and why he can't seem to push that ball away when it comes. Because if you have a look where it goes in, it looks bad, doesn't it? It looks like he should be able to parry that over the bar, and he doesn't. But it's because his feet aren't planted, because he's still moving back. And he showed. I'm not sitting giving Pickford any credit on a Liverpool podcast, but he showed a similar one for Pickford with the Matip save, which I thought was one of Pickford's better saves on the day. And what he does is he seems to retreat to his line very quickly and has his feet planted as Matip heads the ball, and then that allows him to then dive or make the save, or have the energy to do so, or whichever terminology you use. But I thought it was really good insight, and it probably explains a little bit better why Adrian struggled to keep that one out from Keane.
Yeah, my big issue with Adrian, funnily enough, isn't even his shot stopping. It's his actual goalkeeping. It's the way he can just create moments of panic out of nowhere, bad decisions out of nowhere. Basically, what he did last week, first goal against Villa, the gift that he presents to Grealish or Watkins or whoever it might have been. That's my bigger concern with Adrian. So the fact he had a match without one of them, and a very high profile match without one of them as well, I come away from it thinking, okay, fine.
You'll settle for it.
Yeah, I'll settle for it, genuinely. When the first one went in,
I wish I could say that.
I mean, when it comes to our analysis, I will say that we're a lot more qualified to analyse players as opposed to goalkeepers. I think analysing goalkeepers is a specialist thing. And Robert Greene's clearly very good at it. When the first goal went in, and it's off the corner, and it kind of bends Adrian's hands back. It's not great, but at the same time, I didn't overly want to criticise him because there was quite a bit of power on the header, and it was quite close to goal. So, the people I was watching the game were making claims towards it, but I just kept my mouth shut because I wasn't really sure on that one. And the second one that goes in, my first thought was, it was a good header, but my first thought was towards the Pickford one with Matip. And Pickford saved, I thought, a very similar shot about 10-15 minutes earlier, Matip from the corner. But in terms of the doing negative things out of nowhere thing, Pickford was probably worse on the day in terms of the absolutely daft drop kick on Van Dijk, and the last minute conceding the goal to Henderson where the ball rolls over his hand and it gets given as offside. So I thought Pickford got away with two really massive moments but his actual shot stopping on the day probably dwarfed Adrian. So it was, 50-50 really, if you like, between the two of them.
Yeah, I think that was just a classic Pickford performance for me. I mean, you take out
It was.
what turned out to be a scissor kick on Van Dijk, but again, and Robert Green actually touched on that, and I thought he done some really good analysis on that as well. And he runs through the whole move, and what seems to happen is the ball's high looping over. Pickford starts coming out, spots Van Dijk, goes to pause as if maybe he was going to retreat to his line, realises he wouldn't get there in time, so then tries to close Van Dijk down. But he's like, the way keepers kind of do this star dive. He's doing that, but he's doing it while the ball's still in the air. So it's just so uncontrolled. And you think if Van Dijk's not offside and it was tight, it's a penalty that he's conceded. Forget the red card for a minute, which it obviously would have been. It's a penalty conceded. Mo Salah steps up. For me, I always fancy Mo Salah from the penalty spot. I think we've had this conversation, haven't we, in WhatsApp? But I always do. And so I think suddenly you're looking at 2-0, 10 minutes gone. Throwing the red card as well, 2-0, 10 minutes, game over. And that would have been all on Pickford. So that's him all over. But then in the same game, he pulls off really good saves. And that's always been his thing. He'll pull off great saves in most games, but it's just the other aspects that kill you. And yeah, so I probably agree. I'd say, Adrian didn't do a whole lot wrong. He should have done better maybe for the first goal, not in terms of his, plant his feet and things, but he didn't give you any of those chaotic moments that could have cost you the game outright.
Yeah, obviously we've just mentioned there that Liverpool obviously did concede 2 headers. Is that a sign of things to come regarding Van Dijk being absent? Remains to be seen. For those that weren't aware of what I said earlier, there is a full 20-minute podcast. We talk about all those potential problems that might occur without Van Dijk for the next 7-8 months, whatever it's going to be. So, do check that one out. But we're gonna leave the derby there because it's, to be honest, I've wanted to get away from it. I don't think it's been. Even just the reaction on the likes of Twitter and stuff, it's just been absolutely.
I must say, I've said it to you, haven't I? I've really struggled over these last few days because, especially in this position, and you're the same because you do the same for analysing Everton. I found it so difficult because it's just so toxic on either side, and it's just not enjoyable. It's really not. And I tweeted about Everton's performance with nothing offensive about Liverpool at all. I actually complimented Liverpool, saying how good they was, and I had people coming at me over it, and it's just not nice. I'm glad that the derby's done and get back to talking about Liverpool, and just analysing the football side of things. And it was just really toxic. And I hope it doesn't stay like this for the next few years because. I don't want it to be like that, especially in our positions when we want to try and just objectively talk about both teams on the pitch, forget everything else. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So we can do that now regarding Ajax. An interesting game. I've wanted Liverpool to face Ajax for a few years, to be honest. One of the reasons was to go over there, but
I was just thinking
that's off limits at the minute, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, have you got any thoughts on them? I feel like they're vaguely in the same group as when we've previewed Leeds on the first day of the season and when we've previewed maybe Salzburg to an extent. I think they're a bit less mental than those two teams. But in terms of having an idealistic approach, quite offensive-minded, possession-based, won't really be phased by their whole "you've got better players than us" thing. I think it's going to be one of them again, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. They've got a set philosophy that kind of stays in place no matter who they play. Even though Ten Hag is kind of an advocate of it, it's a philosophy that is rife throughout the club at all levels, isn't it? So you kind of brought up on it over there. So yeah, Liverpool kind of know what they're gonna face. There won't be no adaptation to kind of sit back and try and get away with a 0-0 draw or anything like that. So yeah, it's I do think it's interesting when you play sides like that, because they tend to touch wood, be quite entertaining games, especially when Liverpool are involved.
I can see that, to be honest. I can see a few goals at both ends too, considering Liverpool's good in defence at the minute. But in terms of the league this season for Ajax in the Dutch Eredivisie, they've played 5, won 4, lost 1, 11 goals scored and 3 conceded. And I wrote a newsletter a few weeks back, sent that out on the Liverpool's Champions League group. Funnily enough, we haven't actually talked about that, I don't think.
No, we probably should have done a little pod on it, actually, maybe.
Was you off at the time?
I don't think it was. Actually, I don't know. I can't remember. Maybe it was. No, I'm never in.
Yeah. I mean, we can get to it anyway now that the Champions League is starting up. So, but in terms of Ajax, I sent one out a few weeks back. Just, analysing their games, stuff like that, what they're about. And in terms of the numbers that they posted last season in the league, obviously the massive caveat here is that it's the Dutch Eredivisie. But they did come across as kind of the Leeds United of that league in terms of just dominating every single number, really. Goals, shots against, expected goals against, possession, all that dominant stuff. It's just a bit of a different game, isn't it, when you come into Europe? I think when they've come into Europe, they've played a bit more of a transition game. But if they play a transition game, the word transition, I just think of Jurgen Klopp. So it might be one of those kind of you have a go, we have a go sort of games.
Yeah. I think, funny enough, I did have a quick look, only using Wisecout data, just isolated the European fixtures last year. And I think it got skewed a little bit because there was that, crazy game against Chelsea where it was a 4-4. I think Wisecout I'd like Chelsea with next year, like over 5. But it does seem to level out a little bit. In terms of goals, the average 1.75 to 1.08 conceded, so the veteran in that department. Shots 13.5 per 90 to 10.75 per 90. But then XG is pretty much on the nose. It's 1.59 versus 1.53. So, it does seem that when they come up against better sides in Europe, that dominance does seem to level out, which is kind of what we'd expect, isn't it, really?
Yeah, when you look at the way this team play, I'd say that their brand of football is almost kind of the crux of why Jurgen Klopp has his brand of football, really. If you think of the way Klopp started his career, and specifically the time he spends at Borussia Dortmund and things like that, you're coming up against giants in Bayern Munich. When he comes to Liverpool, you're coming up against the likes of Manchester City and teams like that. So I think he's always thrived with a bit of an underdog philosophy, Klopp, whereby, you can have the ball, but we will make you make a mistake on the ball and then we'll punish you by scoring. That's kind of gone away a little bit at Liverpool with time because Liverpool have just become more and more dominant. But I think teams like this, Barcelona also comes to mind, Manchester City to an extent, teams that basically want the ball. I think those teams, Klopp is more than willing to basically allow them to have it, and we will just kind of go back to our transition roots almost, and pressure into the ground before scoring on a counter press. And I think we might see a few of them in this game, like Mane and Salah punishing like a defensive mistake from, I don't know, the likes of Daley Blind who's still playing for them.
Yeah, that's it. Because the thing that I always think, although it's considered a positive, it can be used as a weakness against you, is when you lack that kind of unpredictability, because most sides know how you're going to play because you have such a. Now I think this happened to City in the past, where you kind of know what to expect with City because they're so regimented in the kind of, Pep's so regimented in the philosophy that he deploys that it's a lot easier to kind of prepare a game plan, really. I do think that's been Ajax's downfall sometimes in Europe, is that, sometimes facing European sides, it does, even now, despite all the access to data and video that scouts and analysis will have, there still is sometimes that element of doubt as to what you're going to come up against. But with Ajax, it isn't there, is it really? And that could play into into Liverpool's hands.
Yeah, I mean, even the people who never really watch Dutch football or European football, most people know what Ajax are about. You know, we can't really preview them that much because people probably know what to expect anyway. Because it's Ajax, isn't it? It's the philosophy for football club. In terms of a few of the players that they've got there, they've got Quincy Promes. I hope I've said that right. Liverpool went with him a few years back. Actually, he was at Spartak Moscow, I think.
Yeah.
Quite a tricky winger he was at the time, but he was actually playing as number 10 for Ajax. Dusan Tadic, who again Liverpool linked him a few years ago. I think he's a really good player. Dusan Tadic, really creative player, unpredictable, good in transition. And I've got David Neres as well, who I think has also been linked to both Liverpool and Everton maybe in the past few windows.
Yeah.
Quick attacking
Surprised he hasn't
player.
had a move.
Yeah, so am I. Good in transition, all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, they form basically the crux of the attack of Ajax's 4-2-3-1. I'm not really sure that there's that much more to add regarding Ajax. I think it's a pretty easy match, I think, to play out in your head before it actually takes to the field. Have you got any verdict on this one in terms of how you expect it to play out, where you think the game will be won and lost, and potential scores and all that sort of stuff?
So, yeah, I don't know. I think Ajax will create chances because I think just the way the philosophy works and they're so fine tuned that they do tend to break through sides. But from a defensive point of view, I just think these teams struggle against the power of Liverpool. Like, I don't know the average age off the top of my head, but I know that, I think Tadic is getting on a bit, isn't he? But if a lot of the other players in that team are normally early 20s, just coming out late teens, kind of getting prepared for probably a bigger future at other clubs elsewhere. I do just think that makes them a little bit more vulnerable to being overpowered by stronger sides like Liverpool. So I can't look past Liverpool at all. I'm expecting maybe even a 2 or 3-0 win. No, I'm not going to go for the clean sheet. I'm going to say 2-1.
Yeah, I was going to say then you're a brave man going for a clean sheet there.
No, I've learned my lesson quickly.
Just a little bit on what you've just said there in terms of the ages of the Ajax players. So just this season, going on minutes played for Ajax. So just going from the most minutes played downwards, you've got a 24-year-old, then you've got a 31 and a 30-year-old. That's Blint and Tadic. I think they're the two experienced players in the squad. And then you've got 22. I think Prom might actually be 28 there, unless I'm seeing things.
I'm just going to make a lie of me here.
20-year-old, 28 in Tagliafico, 20, 22, 20, 18. So, I think you're spot on. And I think specifically when it comes to the athletic capacity of Ajax, the physical side, in comparison to Liverpool, I think to an extent we can bully them in certain areas, set pieces, aerial battles and stuff like that. I think the ball tends to spend most of the time on the floor in Holland. And it's a little bit different in England. Shame we haven't got Van Dijk playing.
Yeah, but I was about to say on that point though, I think even Liverpool's traditionally smaller players, so to speak, are still just so strong and physical. Like Sadio Mane, Mo Salah, they're so hard to get off the ball, and they do tend to bully most players they come up against, which I think is maybe just a consequence of playing in the Premier League, for several years.
Yeah, in terms of my verdict, I think I'm gonna go Liverpool win, and I'm gonna say it's gonna be quite an entertaining game, with Liverpool mainly thriving through punishing Ajax when Ajax is trying to build from the back, basically. So I think I'm gonna say 3-1 to Liverpool, but that could be 3-2 or 4-1. I think it could be a bit of a crazy one. I'm not ruling that out at all.
Basically going with goals, but Liverpool to score more than Ajax.
Yeah, I'd say Liverpool to score double the amount that Ajax scored, probably.
Okay.
But yeah, we should be in for a good match there. And then I'd seen that probably opposite end of the scale, Sheffield United, who we face next week. They've had a bad start, Dave.
Yeah, they have. I don't think they've won yet, have they, so far this season?
No, they've got
No.
1 point all season, and I think that was gained the other day against Fulham. And even in that game, they were relatively lucky because they went a goal down with 15 minutes left, I think.
Yeah. So I think, their main issue just seems to be woes in attack, doesn't it? They just can't seem to put the ball in the back of the net. I don't know how many goals they've scored off the top of my head, but I know it won't be a lot. In fact, I have a quick look now.
So goals for, they have scored 2 at the bottom of the league.
There you go. Yeah, that sums it up.
No team have scored fewer than that.
Yeah. So yeah, they look a little bit disjointed. I must admit, I don't expect them to stay in this form. I'm not saying I expect them to push on and replicate what they did last season. But I just think they're a little bit disjointed at the moment. But they've brought in the likes of Brewster. I think they will find a little bit of rhythm eventually. But yeah, I don't think they do enough at the attacking end of the pitch. And at the end of the day, that's where games are won and lost, aren't they? Scoring goals. I've gone very Gillette Soccer Saturday with that comment, but it is true. I don't think they've suddenly become a really bad team overnight. It's just I expect them to be kind of mid to bottom half, kind of loitering around that relegation zone this season.
Yeah, I think if you look at the numbers, obviously it's very early days, but even last season, I think their numbers are about placing them between maybe 10th and 16th, maybe 15th, in and around that area. Really, this season, I think they've been on the wrong side of variance. To be honest, I think they've had a bit of bad luck there. Like John Egan's red card against, I think it might have been Aston Villa. I thought it was harsh, but
you're just saying that because he was in your fancy football team.
Oh, no. Little -1 there, absolutely useless. Got transferred out the next week. But I do think they've been a little bit unlucky. Like I think their expected goals against is better than the number of goals they've actually conceded. Yeah, I'd expect them to improve, but not that much. I still think I think this season they'll be worse off than last season, fully enough, in terms of the final position. I think they'll finish outside the top 10 this season. If you look at the number of shots that they've taken so far, they've taken 40, which is the joint fewest, same as West Brom. Liverpool, for perspective, have taken 94. So that's more than double Sheffield United. I think last season Sheffield United took the fewest shots, I think, in the whole league. Maybe Crystal Palace took fewer. I think it's out of them two for the bottom two. And their expected goals against isn't as bad, though. That's where they get the results, really, isn't it? The defence, back five, don't really tend to concede many. And I think their expected goals against this season places them about, I think that's about eighth in the league, which obviously isn't enough to be bottom of the league or to be standing on 1 point. That should get them points more often than not. But obviously this season, it has been a bit mental, hasn't it, with the number of goals scored?
Yeah, and what I will say is just on that point you talking about the defence, that they're not a side who tend to get ever rolled over, are they? It's always a tight game with them. Obviously, if they could score a little bit more, then that'd be a good thing, but they don't. But they still tend to make teams work really hard to score past them. Even if, I'm just having a quick look at the results now, and it was Sheffield. What was it? Yeah. So they drew with Fulham 1-1, got beat by Arsenal 2-1, beat by Leeds 1-0, Villa beat them 1-0, Wolves beat them 2-0. But even last season, I thought Liverpool were fantastic against them last season at Anfield, and that was still just a 2-0 game. And then it was that Dean Henderson error, wasn't it? Bramall Lane last year, which kind of give Liverpool the win. Otherwise, that had all the makings of a bit of a 0-0. Even though Liverpool with a much better side, that was the difference between getting 3 points or 1. So I think they definitely do make you work hard for your goals against them.
I've just came onto the results myself here, and if you look at the performance numbers, they haven't deserved to win any of the games so far, but you could argue they haven't deserved to lose either. Like every match, as you've said, has been really tight according to expected goals at least. So on the opening day of the season against Wolves, XG 0.6, Wolves posted 1.1. Against Villa 0.9, Villa posted 1. Against Leeds, both teams posted 1.6. Against Arsenal, they posted 0.2, Arsenal posted 0.4. And against Fulham, they posted 1.4, Fulham posted 1.9. So it is really fine margins, and I think this is what I mentioned about them being on the wrong end of variance a little bit. Sometimes you'll get them going for you, sometimes you'll get a fluke penalty, an own goal, and it can turn the tide sort of thing. And I think Sheffield United have started the season suffering from a little bit of that, and I think we keep mentioning this every now and then, and you can't put any kind of number on it, but I do think the lack of fans in the ground feels like it impacts them more than any other team for some reason. I don't know. I'm not really sure why. I can't really put my finger on that, but
I do remember I can't remember which player it was. It might have been Wilder, the manager, but I don't think it was. I'm sure it was a player who did, basically come out to say that. Said they're the type of team who thrive on it a little bit. And that's not even just a home games, you say away games as well. And I've heard a few players say that, you do kind of get that buzz going into the lines then a little bit, and having this kind of mentality of them versus us, the world versus us. I think that does motivate teams, and Sheffield United are definitely one of those teams that are put in that bracket. And obviously, being without that, it suddenly becomes 11 versus 11, and when you're in the inferior side, more often than not, I think it does start to impact, because the psychological aspects of the game are really important. Even if others don't value them. I know we talk a lot about numbers, but we definitely value them, and they do seem to be a team who get impacted a little bit by it. It seems.
I mean, you mentioned Brewster earlier. We're going to have to talk about him because he could get his first start at Anfield. Funnily enough, he came on against Fulham with half an hour left. Did you see him? Did you see the match?
No, I didn't.
I watched the game. He didn't get a look in. Didn't get a chance. Few little stray passes, looked a little bit lost. So it wasn't the best half-hour period to be introduced into. Considering he's been at Liverpool for so long, maybe Chris Wilder will look at Anfield as the home that he recognises. He'll know that if Sheffield United get any kind of chance to get a result, they will need to score them. Brewster, if he is anything, is a poacher and will put the ball in the back of the net when he's presented with a shot. So it'll be interesting to see if he starts. Do you think he's a threat for Liverpool, or do you think he'll be easily managed?
I'd start him personally. I think
I would as well.
I think there's going to be a lot of motivation from his point of view to score. Not because he wants to do Liverpool any harm, but he obviously, my outside impression of this whole deal of him going there is this kind of, if you go out and you tear it up, we're going to bring you back to Anfield on the buyback clause. So I think he'll be seeing this as almost like a 2-year loan to go out, score lots of goals, fine-tune the game, and hopefully come back to Anfield. So
we've actually got the buyback for 3 years, believe it or not.
Oh, for 3 years? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So
there we go.
So
he's got Liverpool. Yeah, good deal then, obviously. But yeah, if he goes tears it up, he knows he can go and be potentially Liverpool's number 9 further down the line. So what better chance has he got to kind of start proving himself than going putting in a really good display against Liverpool and hopefully scoring. He'll be thinking, if I do that, then I can't be ignored, and they might already start regretting the decision. Plus, by the way, they're not scoring goals, so why wouldn't you put in a player who's got that threat?
Yeah. I think, to be honest, though, ahead of the match, I'm a little bit more concerned about his partner, because it's probably going to be Ollie McBurney, I would guess. He's really good in the air, and Van Dijk's bossed him for the last season. We played them twice. Sheffield United pose an aerial threat. A lot of their way to get up the field and into the final third is a long ball to McBurney. And Van Dijk has been really, really good at nullifying that. Obviously, we don't have Van Dijk now. We still have players who are good in the air, but I think McBurney will be more of a problem now for Liverpool's defence. And I think moving forward for the season, to be honest, this will probably be a recurring theme, whereby if we're playing a team that me or Dave think this is a Van Dijk game, we will flag it on the podcast. But this, considering that's at Anfield, it feels like it's going to be less so, especially if Liverpool just dominate and control proceedings and stuff like that. But Sheffield United and Ollie McBurney, it does pose a little bit of a you could do with Van Dijk in this game.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think only 3 players have attempted more headed shots this season, and only 4 teams have attempted more crosses. So you can probably guess what they're going to try and do. And I agree, Van Dijk, it is bread and butter, that kind of stuff. He normally wins the headers. He brings sort of the composure in Liverpool's penalty area for the others to kind of maintain their own composure and clear the lines without too much kind of hassle. We're going to find out. It's probably actually a good test, to be honest, Josh, for life without Van Dijk this game, because it's, as you touched on, it's not too intense. It's not like you're going away from home against the side in really good form, scoring lots of goals from crosses and headers, but it's a side that's got enough threat for you to kind of get a feel for what you're going to face, and maybe even hopefully just build a bit of confidence. So, you do deal with these crosses and win a few of these aerial duels, then it can add that confidence for the next few weeks.
Yeah, one thing that I did notice before, just on the aerial stuff, is, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Dave, but when I was looking at the stats before, I was looking at aerial success for each team in the Premier League so far. Liverpool are actually bottom of the league for aerial success. Liverpool have only won 40.5% of the duels that they've contested. Top of the league is Chelsea, winning 67.2%. Obviously, we're only a few games in, and the number of aerial duels that Liverpool have contested is currently on about 126. I think Liverpool have contested. We've lost 75 of them. Over the course of a full season, you'll contest over 1,000. But for Liverpool to be bottom of aerial duel success, it's quite weird. That, I mean, last season I think we finished second for that. Is that a worry, or
I don't know. I must admit, to be the worst, I am quite surprised. But I think if we try to contextualize it, I suppose that includes attacking aerial duels as well, which obviously are a lot harder to win. Liverpool do a lot more attacking than most teams. I think Liverpool have put in the second most crosses in the Premier League so far. So I guess that probably skews the numbers a little bit. And they probably do less defensive headers because they tend to dominate most matches. But putting all that to one side, there probably is still an element that they're not maybe dominating the same way that they probably would like to in that department. But as we'll probably find out in the next few weeks if that's just kind of a blip or if it's something to look at and be concerned about.
Yeah, it's one to keep an eye on, because it's quite uncharacteristic. Obviously, Liverpool put a lot of crosses, and as you say, we hit a lot of balls up the field with no intention of really winning the first challenge, but winning the second ball. But for Liverpool to be bottom of the league, a little bit weird. So we'll keep an eye on that one. So I actually think, just as a little side note for this game, a 4-2-3-1 might be on the cards. And the reason to think that is because we know for certain Sheffield United will be playing a back five. And Klopp sometimes goes for 4-2-3-1 against back five systems, because the group of front four attackers can pin back the back five by occupying the channels between each player, if you know what I mean. So it's a way of pinning back the back five, and obviously if we're now going to have to use a midfielder in Fabinho in defence, and we've got Jota there ready to go and stuff like that, maybe Klopp will opt for, and we're at home as well, maybe Klopp will opt for four attackers, midfield two, Fabinho in the back line sort of thing. Just considering we're coming up against the back five at home, and the way their squad's shaping up with Van Dijk's injury and stuff, I think it's one to keep an eye on. That Liverpool go for 4-2-3-1 with Jota starting.
Yeah, I think it's the perfect opportunity, to be honest. I think it's the absolute perfect game. I think you know what you're going to expect from the opposition.
Well, I'll say.
Yeah. And, you know, for whether there's question marks over Shaqiri, he does tend to come in and do a job, doesn't he? I kind of think of the Merseyside derby last year where he hadn't really played. He come in and he scored, didn't he? And he had a fairly good game. So, I just think it is the perfect opposition at Anfield. You know what you're going to get from them. They're not in great form. You may need to break them down a little bit more, which you could then do with that extra attacker on the pitch. You've got a kind of really good candidate in Jota to come in from the start and be one of those attackers. It just seems the best bet. Providing Thiago's fit as well, it'd be good to have him in there, but I don't know if he's going to be.
I was just thinking about the consoling aspect of it, and maybe Klopp will be less inclined to play with a 4-2-3-1 without Van Dijk in the back line. But if Thiago's playing, that gives you a bit more control. But it remains to be seen. It's just one maybe to keep an eye on for the match. So verdict on this one then?
Tough one, actually. I think it could be a tight one, actually. I think it'll be a tight Liverpool victory. I'm going to go 2-0. As I said, just for the reasons I said before, where I expect Liverpool to be a better side, but the Sheffield United do make you work for the goals. And even when Liverpool were at the best last season, they still only scored 3 in 2 games. So I'm expecting Liverpool better side, but just 2-0.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go 3. And I'm going to say 0, simply because of Sheffield United's lack of attack, really. And I think Liverpool first game in the Premier League without Van Dijk, I feel like the focus will be on it. Sheffield United could obviously cause a problem from certain set pieces, but you've got to get up the field to get them set pieces. Mind you, we've got Adrian in goal still. I don't know. I think this one will be quite comfortable. Not comfortable as in, you do have to work against this team without doubt. But I think last season when we faced them at Anfield, and they were more informed then than they are now, we did really, really dominate them. And I think Chris Wilder praised us actually after the match. Didn't really give them a sniff. So I think I'm going to go 3-0. But the defence isn't easy to break through. It could easily be 1-0 or something like that. But I think Liverpool will win this one. But we'll leave it there. We'll wrap up. So thanks for joining us, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Josh.
And we will be back next week to talk about whoever Liverpool are playing. I can't remember who it is.
Who are they playing?
I'm going to check that now. I'm not sure, So Liverpool are playing West Ham.
West Ham is strange, aren't they?
Yeah, I wrote about them recently. So tune in next week for the West Ham preview. Thanks for tuning in. See you later.
Cheers.